Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive into boundaries today.
Oh, yeah.
From the book, Boundaries, When to Say Yes, How to Say No to Take Control of Your Life.
Yes.
And I think we all kind of maybe know a little something about boundaries, but I'm really excited to get into this one.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Boundaries are such an important topic, and this book really breaks it down in a way that's easy to understand.
I mean, I know they're important,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I know I need them, but what does that really look like?
Right. Well, the book starts off by comparing boundaries to property lines for our lives.
Okay, property lines.
Yeah.
So like fences and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't build your shed on my side of the yard.
Exactly. Just like we have those physical boundaries,
Right.
we need personal boundaries to define where we end and someone else begins.
So like you're protecting your space.
Protecting our space, protecting ourselves physically, emotionally, even spiritually. You wouldn't let someone walk into your home and start rearranging your furniture, would you?
No.
Well, boundaries are about having that same sense of ownership over your own life.
That's such a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I noticed in the book there were a couple of different types of people when it comes to boundaries. They talked about compliance and controllers.
Yeah.
Are those kind of like the two ends of the spectrum?
You got it. Compliance are the people pleasers, the ones who have a hard time saying no. They bend over backwards to make others happy, often at their own expense.
Like Robert.
Yeah, like Robert.
The poor guy in the book who just
Couldn't say no to his wife.
couldn't say no to his wife spending all their money.
And what's so interesting about Robert's story is that his inability to set boundaries stemmed from his childhood.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he grew up in a family where his sisters were allowed to physically fight him without any consequences, but he wasn't allowed to fight back.
Oh, wow.
So he learned to suppress his own needs to avoid conflict.
And he carried that into adulthood.
Exactly. And on the flip side, we have the controllers.
Controllers.
Yeah, those are the folks who have trouble respecting other people's boundaries. Always trying to dictate what others should do or how they should feel.
So like Steve,
That
that horrible boss, from the book.
Yes. Always on his assistant Frank's case, expecting him to work late, answer calls during dinner.
Yeah, it's like, dude, have some boundaries.
Poor Frank.
Yeah.
All that pressure eventually led to burnout.
Yeah,
It highlights how important it is to recognize and respect boundaries in the workplace.
totally. Now, they also mentioned a couple of other types, non-responsives and avoidance. What are those all about?
Yeah, so non-responsive struggle with engaging in relationships, and avoidance tend to isolate themselves. These are definitely boundary issues too, but the book mainly focuses on compliance and controllers since they're the most common struggles people face.
Gotcha. Okay. So where do these boundary issues come from? Is it always like Robert's story rooted in childhood experiences?
Yeah, childhood plays a huge role. The book talks about how healthy boundaries are rooted in those early experiences, particularly during key phases of development.
I remember seeing some fancy terms for those phases in the book, something about like hatching and...
Hatching, practicing, and rapprochement.
What approachable? Okay, so what does that even mean?
Right. Essentially, these terms describe how kids learn to separate from their parents and develop a sense of self.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like when little kids start saying no to everything.
Yeah. My niece is in that phase right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's their way of testing limits, figuring out where they stand. And when parents provide consistent and loving boundaries during those times, it teaches kids that it's okay to have needs and express them. It's okay to say no without losing their parents' love.
Right. So what happens when those healthy boundaries aren't there?
That's when things can get messy. For example, the book talked about a kid throwing a tantrum in the supermarket. If the parent always gives in and buys them candy just to quiet them down, the kid learns that their outbursts can control others.
I've definitely seen that one before.
Oh,
I've seen that so many times.
classic example. And that can create a controlling adult who throws a fit when they don't get their way.
Right.
And then there's Jerry from the book, who was constantly hit by his mother as a child.
Oh, wow.
So he learned to suppress his own needs just to avoid getting hurt. And that carried over into his adult relationships, leaving him vulnerable to control and manipulation.
It's kind of heartbreaking how those early traumas can affect us later in life
Yeah.
with boundaries.
It's not always as simple as just saying no. There can be some deep-seated reasons why people struggle with this stuff.
Yeah, recognizing those deeper wounds is a crucial part of the journey towards healthier boundaries. And speaking of journeys toward healthier boundaries, the book lays out 10 laws of boundaries.
Oh, yeah, those laws.
Yeah.
Those were so interesting.
Yeah.
What was the one about, what was it like, reaping what you sow or something?
The law of sowing and reaping.
Digital one.
It emphasizes that our actions have consequences.
Oh, okay. You know, just like a farmer reaps what they plant.
Mm-hmm.
Our choices and relationships have a ripple effect.
So, like, if you're constantly bailing someone out of trouble,
Yeah.
you're not really helping them in the long run.
Exactly.
You're kind of enabling that behavior.
Precisely. They gave an example in the book of a spouse who's always rescuing their partner,
Okay.
you know, from financial trouble or covering up their mistakes.
Right.
And while that might seem helpful in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
it prevents the person from facing the natural consequences of their actions.
So you're actually doing them a disservice.
Exactly.
Yes.
Setting boundaries isn't about being mean or punishing someone.
Right.
It's about letting them experience the natural outcomes of their choices, which can actually lead to growth and change.
It's about tough love.
Tough love, yeah.
Oh, there was another law that I really liked.
Yeah.
I think it was called the law of exposure.
Oh, yes, the law of exposure.
It was kind of like an aha moment for me.
That one's a good one. It basically highlights how unspoken boundaries often lead to, you know, messy situations.
Because you're expecting people to be mind readers.
Exactly, like expecting people to just know what your boundaries are.
Right.
They used a funny analogy in the book
Okay.
about an alien visiting Earth.
Okay.
And if the alien doesn't understand gravity, it might try to fly and end up crashing.
Yeah.
It's the same with boundaries. If we don't clearly communicate our limits,
Right.
people might unknowingly cross those invisible lines, leaving us feeling hurt, frustrated, or resentful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to speak up.
Yeah, speak up, be direct about our needs.
No more guessing games?
No more guessing games. We need to own our no and express those boundaries with confidence.
It was interesting because the book actually addresses some common myths about boundaries.
Oh, the myths.
You know, like some people think setting boundaries is selfish.
Right.
Or disobedient.
The common misconception.
Yep.
And it often stems from cultural or religious beliefs that emphasize self-sacrifice
Okay.
or unquestioning obedience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But the book clarifies that healthy boundaries are actually about taking responsibility for your own well-being,
Right.
which in turn allows you to love and support others more effectively.
It's not selfish.
It's not selfish at all. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
It's about taking care of yourself so you can better care for others.
Totally. Now, speaking of different relationships, I like how the book delves into specific areas
Yes.
like marriage, parenting, work, friendships.
It's fascinating to see how these principles play out
Yeah.
in different contexts.
Starting with marriage,
Okay.
the book really emphasizes the importance of clear boundaries
Yeah, communication is key
for a healthy relationship.
for a healthy and fulfilling relationship. Absolutely.
Like Nancy and what was her husband's name?
Bob.
I felt so bad for Bob
Oh, poor Bob.
because Nancy was always like demanding things from him.
Oh, constantly making demands.
Yeah, like catering to her every whim.
And that created a lot of resentment and distance between them.
Right.
Her need for control really eroded their connection.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So the book really stresses that open communication and the willingness to say no
Yeah.
are crucial for a balanced partnership.
It's about meeting each other's needs while also honoring your own.
Okay, so then there's parenting,
Parenting.
which always feels like
Oh, that's a tough one.
a tricky one.
Yeah, but it's so important.
Right.
The book identifies 3 key roles for parents: guardian, manager, and source.
Oh, okay, break that down.
As guardians, we protect our children from harm.
Okay.
As managers, we set limits, provide structure,
Mm-hmm.
and as sources, we offer love, support, and guidance.
So it's not just about being the fun parent.
No, it's about finding that balance
Right.
between love and limits.
Yeah, and they talked about teaching kids about delayed gratification.
Yes, delayed gratification.
Isn't that like that marshmallow test?
The marshmallow test,
Oh.
exactly.
Where they put the marshmallow in front of the kids.
Yeah,
And if they wait, they get 2.
exactly. It's about resisting that temptation
Yeah.
of immediate pleasure in favor of a bigger reward down the line.
I can see how that ties into boundaries.
Absolutely.
You know, learning self-control, respecting limits.
Self-control, respecting limits, yeah.
Okay, so then there's the workplace,
Ah, the work.
where our boundaries can be really hard to set.
Especially if you're worried about your career.
Right.
You know, the book mentioned Lori,
Oh, Lori, yeah.
who really struggled to say no to extra work.
She was such a people pleaser.
Yeah, worried about appearing incompetent
Yeah.
or letting her colleagues down.
Right, and I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely. It highlights that pressure we often feel to be yes people at work.
Yeah.
But, like Lori eventually learned, prioritizing tasks and setting limits on your time can actually lead to increased productivity and reduced stress.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Working smarter, not harder. Exactly.
Okay, and last but not least, we have friendships,
Friendships, oh yeah.
which can also be kind of tricky because you want to be there for your friends.
You want to be supportive, of course.
But sometimes their needs can be a little unreasonable.
Yeah, you can feel obligated to always be there, even when it's inconvenient or draining.
That was Marcia.
Oh, Marcia and Tammy.
Tammy was a lot.
Yeah, Marcia was always putting Tammy's needs before her own, always listening to her problems,
Right.
offering support,
Yeah.
even when it was inconvenient or emotionally exhausting.
But Tammy wasn't really doing the same for her.
No, it wasn't a two-way street.
Right, so Marcia ended up feeling resentful.
Resentful and unappreciated.
Yeah, and it's like that lack of boundaries in a friendship really created that imbalance.
Exactly. It's a classic case of one person giving too much and the other taking advantage.
Yeah.
And the book emphasized the importance of being honest with friends about your limits.
Okay.
You know, learning to say no when necessary. It's about creating a dynamic of mutual respect and support rather than one-sided dependence.
So we've talked about what boundaries are, why they're important,
Yeah.
how they show up in different relationships.
Yeah.
But how do we actually go about setting them? What are some practical tips from the book?
Yeah, they had some great advice in there.
Okay.
First, they encourage you to identify areas where you struggle with boundaries.
So it's like self-reflection time.
Exactly. Honest self-reflection. Acknowledge any patterns of overgiving, people-pleasing, or allowing others to take advantage.
You're taking inventory of your own boundary baggage.
Boundary baggage. I like that. And once you've identified those areas,
Okay.
the book offers some practical tips.
Like what?
Like learning to say no more assertively,
Okay.
being truthful about your feelings and needs, and even creating physical or emotional distance when needed to protect your well-being.
So just being really clear about what you need.
Clear, direct, unapologetic about what you need. And they also emphasize the importance of having a support system during this process.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it can be tough to change those ingrained patterns on your own.
Right.
So having trusted friends, family members, or even a therapist
Yeah.
to offer guidance and accountability.
Support system.
Yeah, it can make a huge difference.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into boundaries. We've talked about what they are, why they're important, the different types. But now I want to get into the real nitty gritty.
Yeah.
How do you actually set boundaries, especially in those tricky situations
Absolutely.
where it's not so easy?
That can be tough.
Yeah, because the book acknowledges that
Yeah.
it's not always sunshine and roses.
No, not always.
People might not always be happy
Right.
when you start setting boundaries.
Exactly. When you start setting boundaries, especially with people who aren't used to you having them.
Right. So what do you do when people push back or get defensive?
Well, it's important to remember that their reaction is often a reflection of their own discomfort.
Okay.
With change or with their own boundary issues. They might feel like they're losing something.
Okay.
Or that you're changing the rules of the game. It's not a personal attack on you, even though it can feel that way in the moment.
It's more about them than you.
Exactly. So the book encourages us to focus on our own response,
Right.
not letting their reaction dictate our actions.
So stay strong in what you need.
Stay strong, stay grounded in your truth, communicate clearly and assertively,
Yeah.
and most importantly, stay consistent with your boundaries.
But that can be really hard.
It can be.
Especially if you have that person in your life who's really good at
Well, yeah, the button pushers.
pushing your buttons. Yeah.
Button pushers, it can be tough.
So what do you do in those moments?
Well, the book suggests learning to detach emotionally,
Okay.
which, again, can be tough,
Yeah.
but it's really helpful in those heated situations. And they also talk about using I statements
I statements.
to express your feelings,
Yeah.
which can help take the accusatory tone out of the conversation.
Right. So instead of saying, you're always making me feel bad,
Right.
you would say, I feel overwhelmed when.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your feelings, clearly stating your needs without blaming the other person.
Yeah.
And then, of course, setting clear consequences for boundary violations.
So it's not about punishing them.
No, it's not about being punitive,
Okay.
but it's about letting the other person know that there are repercussions for their actions.
Now, I remember there was something in the book called the broken record technique.
Oh, the broken record technique.
I love that.
It's brilliant. It involves calmly and repeatedly stating your boundary,
Yeah.
without getting drawn into arguments or justifications.
You're just like a broken record.
Exactly. You're just repeating that boundary over and over again.
That's a good one.
It's like a pre-recorded message that you play back whenever someone tries to push your limits.
Okay, so then there's guilt.
Guilt.
That's a big one.
Guilt is a tough one.
Because I feel like a lot of people will use guilt
Oh, yeah, it's a common manipulation tactic.
to manipulate others.
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, the book reminds us that guilt is often a tool
Okay.
used by others to try and control our behavior.
Oh.
So it urges us to recognize guilt trips for
Yeah.
what they are and not give in to them.
Okay.
Remember, you have the right to say no without feeling guilty.
Okay.
And true love respects boundaries rather than trying to control or manipulate.
Okay, I like that. Now, so far we've been talking about how boundaries affect our relationships with others.
Right.
But I know the book also emphasizes the importance of
Self-care.
self-care. Yes.
It's crucial.
It's so important.
Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others.
Mhm.
It's also about saying yes to yourself,
Right.
to your own well-being.
So like doing things that make you feel good.
Exactly. Engage in activities that nourish you, whether it's exercise, relaxation, spending time in nature, pursuing hobbies that bring you joy.
It's like filling your own cup so you have something to give to others.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're constantly giving to others without taking care of yourself, you'll eventually burn out and become resentful.
So self-care is not selfish.
No, it's essential
It's essential.
for maintaining healthy relationships. It's an act of self-respect, and it's crucial for showing up as your best self in all areas of your life.
I love that. And, the book ends on such a powerful note. It reminds us that setting boundaries is not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of strength and self-awareness.
It is. It's about taking ownership of your life, making choices that align with your values,
Yeah,
and creating space for authentic connections and genuine love.
that's a beautiful way to put it. And before we go, I want to leave you with that thought-provoking question from the book. Which relationship in your life would benefit most from clearer boundaries? And what might that look like?
It really gets you thinking.
It does. So take some time to reflect on that question and consider even one small step you can take today to start setting healthier boundaries. Remember, you deserve to have your needs met and your limits respected. And setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about creating a space for healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring those boundaries.